What is the greatest command Jesus gave his followers after teaching them about God's love? It wasn't to build large organizations or institutions. It wasn't to gain more influence. And it certainly wasn't even to become successful leaders. It was remarkably simple and profoundly challenging. Love one another as I have loved you. Imagine what would happen if every conversation at work reflected that command. What if every leadership decision was filtered through genuine love? What if our homes became places where people felt deeply valued? Our workplaces became communities of trust, and our churches became known not merely for what they believed, but for how they loved. In an age where people are more digitally connected than ever before, yet often feel increasingly isolated, Jesus' words are as relevant today as they were 2,000 years ago. Welcome into the Listening Heart, folks, the podcast where spiritual leadership helps us integrate business, work, and life through timeless biblical wisdom. Now, I'm quoting from the Bible because of the spiritual wisdom found there, which can be applied to all walks of life. I'm using the quotes as foundational for love and justice, compassion, forgiveness, and mercy. And in no way am I presenting them from a specific religious perspective. Hi, I'm Richard Fontenay, and my own leadership journey has been shaped by 6 years studying with the Benedictine monks, 18 years serving in government leadership, more than 45 years consulting with organizations and with leaders, and now the privilege of serving through the Fontenay magazine eLearning. And throughout that journey, I discovered that leadership is ultimately less about position and more about relationships. And today's conversation builds naturally on this week's Fontenay magazine eLearning Leadership Companion, Relationship Capital, why it's the currency of the future. And there we explore relationships are one of the greatest investments. And today we'll discover the deeper spiritual foundation behind every meaningful relationship. Now, one of the first lessons we learn from Jesus is that love always begins by paying attention. Throughout the Gospels, we see him stopping for people others hurried past. He noticed the blind man by the roadside. He welcomed children others tried to dismiss. He listened to those burdened by illness, disappointment, and failure. Even amid demanding crowds, Jesus never treated people as interruptions. He treated them as individuals, created in the image of God. And that simple observation challenges many of us. Modern life rewards efficiency. Jesus demonstrated presence. We often measure productivity by how much we accomplish. And Jesus measured ministry by how deeply he loved. Perhaps genuine relationships begin not with speaking more, but with listening better. Listening says, you matter. Your story matters. Your struggles matter. And I want to understand before I seek to be understood. Now, that kind of listening transforms conversations. It also transforms leaders. Shortly before his crucifixion, Jesus gathered his disciples in the upper room. Knowing his earthly ministry was nearing conclusion, he gave them what has become one of Christianity's defining commands. Quote, "A new command I give you, love one another. As I have loved you, so you must love one another. And by this, everyone will know that you are my disciples if you love one another. End of quote. Notice what Jesus didn't say. He didn't say people would recognize his followers because they possessed impressive knowledge, or because they won every argument, or because they held influential positions. He said they would be recognized by their love. And that remains one of Christianity's greatest opportunities, and perhaps one of its greatest challenges. Love is never easy to discuss. It becomes much harder when practiced with difficult people, stressful workplaces, family disagreements, or demanding customers. Yet, authentic Christian leadership has always been demonstrated through relationships rather than rhetoric. Now, let's take a look at loving through our businesses, work, and life. One of the guiding principles of the FMelearning is that leadership cannot be compartmentalized. Who we are on Sunday is who we become on Monday. A deep spirituality should shape business decisions. Integrity should guide our work. And grace should strengthen our families. And kindness should enrich our communities. Meaningful relationships connect all four. For instance, in business, we often focus on transactions, whereas Jesus focused on people. Organizations certainly need profitability to survive, but long-term success grows from trust, honesty, and service. Customers remember how they were treated long after they forget the details of a purchase. Employees remember leaders who cared for them as people rather than simply viewing them as resources. When businesses serve people well, everyone benefits. And at work, most of us spend a significant portion of our lives working alongside others. Every workplace becomes an opportunity to practice patience, encouragement, humility, forgiveness, and respect. Some of our greatest opportunities for spiritual leadership often occur behind the scenes. They happen around meeting tables, in hallway conversations, during difficult projects, and through acts of quiet encouragement. You know, every interaction becomes an opportunity to reflect the love that we have for one another. And in life, we find that relationships within our families often shape us more deeply than any professional achievement. And for instance, children remember whether they felt loved or not. Spouses remember whether they felt appreciated. And friends remember whether we showed up during difficult seasons. Love becomes visible through ordinary faithfulness. It is expressed in listening, in serving, in forgiving, and in remaining present. Such small moments often become life's most cherished memories. Now, here's a story about presence and acceptance in leadership. I know of a leader whose influence extended way beyond his organization. People respected his wisdom, admired his integrity, and sought his advice. Now, whenever there was a difficult conflict, whether that be in the boardroom or at an organizational meeting, he always ended with, "We love you anyway." And he really meant it. It demonstrated to me that his leadership wasn't built upon egotistical aggrandizement. It was built upon acceptance and presence of the other. People often left his office feeling heard, feeling valued, feeling encouraged, and they knew that they mattered. And perhaps that is one of the greatest expressions of Christian love in action. Simply being fully present with another human being. In a distracted world, presence has become one of the rarest and most valuable gifts that we can offer each other. Now, I found that relationships reflect God's heart, so to speak. The Bible begins and ends with relationship. God created humanity for relationship with himself. He called Israel into covenant relationship. And Jesus restored broken relationships through his life and death and resurrection. The Holy Spirit continually forms believers into a loving community. And from Genesis to Revelation, Scripture tells the story of God's desire to reconcile people, to reconcile them to himself. And this reminds us that relationships are not something that we can just dismiss. They are central to God's design for human flourishing. Every act of kindness, every word of encouragement, every gesture of forgiveness, every opportunity to serve reflects something of God's own heart of love. When we love well, we really participate in his work of restoration. Now, after a short break that's coming up, we'll explore why forgiveness is essential to meaningful relationships. Examine practical ways to love difficult people without compromising truth, and discover how Christ's example can transform our leadership at home, at work, and within our communities. And we'll conclude with this week's learning lens and one practical invitation to carry into the week ahead. Now, please join me for a break with some coffee. If you're able, set aside your work for just a moment, take a deep breath, and take a slow sip of your coffee or tea, and consider this question. Who showed you what love looked like? Perhaps it was a parent, a grandparent, a teacher, a pastor, a friend, or perhaps someone whose quiet kindness came at exactly the right moment in your life. Now, as I reflect on my own journey, I realize that people who shaped me most were rarely the loudest voices in the room. They were the ones who consistently showed respect, patience, genuine concern for others. And they taught me that leadership begins long before we hold a title. It begins in the way we treat people. One conversation, one encouragement, one thoughtful act of service. These are often the moments that leave the deepest imprint on another person's life. Now, as you finish your coffee, think of one person you can intentionally encourage today. It may be a small gesture, but it will have a lasting impact. Now, let's continue with how to approach difficult people with love. Jesus did not command us to love only those who are easy to love. He called us to love everyone, even those who misunderstood us, disappoint us, or opposed us. That may be one of the most challenging aspects of Christian leadership. Every workplace has personalities that test our patience. Every family experiences seasons of misunderstanding. And every place of worship encounters differing opinions. And finally, every community includes people with whom we disagree. If love depended upon agreement, very few relationships would survive. Instead, Christian love chooses respect even when opinions differ. It chooses kindness over sarcasm, listening over assumptions, and grace over resentment. This does not mean we ignore truth or avoid difficult conversations. Jesus never compromised truth, yet he always communicated truth with compassion. And that balance remains one of the greatest leadership lessons that we can learn. Strong leaders speak honestly, but Christ-like leaders speak honestly and lovingly. Now let's continue with this tough love, with the healing power of forgiveness. Every meaningful relationship eventually encounters disappointment. Someone forgets, someone speaks carelessly, and someone lets us down. Without forgiveness, relationships gradually become burdened by resentment. Forgiveness is often misunderstood. It is not pretending that wrong actions never happened, nor does it remove appropriate accountability. Forgiveness is choosing not to allow yesterday's wounds to control tomorrow's relationships. Jesus demonstrated this repeatedly. Peter denied him, the disciples abandoned him, yet after his resurrection, according to the scriptures, Jesus restored rather than rejected. He met Peter with grace and not condemnation. He entrusted him once again with responsibility. And that restoration reminds us that failure need not become the final chapter in anyone's story. As leaders, parents and colleagues, friends and followers of Christ, we have opportunities every day to become agents of reconciliation. And sometimes the strongest relationship is not the one that has never been broken. It is the one that has been restored through humility, forgiveness, and renewed trust. Now, here's a question for you. Can you become a builder of community? Healthy relationships rarely happen by accident. Someone chooses to make the first move. Someone welcomes the newcomer. Someone notices the quiet individual standing alone. And someone asks, "How are you really doing?" A community grows whenever people intentionally create space for others to belong. Jesus excelled at building community. He welcomed fishermen and tax collectors, women and children, the wealthy and the poor, the respected and the rejected. His invitation was remarkably inclusive. He said, "Come, follow me." And that invitation continues today, whether we lead in business, at work, at home, or within our churches. We can become a people who build bridges rather than walls, and the world already has enough division. Leadership offers an opportunity to cultivate unity without demanding uniformity. People do not have to become identical to belong. They simply need to know they are valued. But how do we live out Christ's command in practical ways? Well, it often begins with remarkably ordinary choices. We can learn someone's name and remember it, and that's difficult for me. We can thank people for their contributions. We can celebrate another person's success without comparison. We can offer encouragement before criticism, or listen without checking your phone. Speak words that build rather than diminish. And we can pray for those that we lead. We can extend patience when someone is learning, and apologize quickly when you are wrong. Now, these actions may appear small, yet over time they create cultures where trust grows naturally. Leadership is rarely defined by dramatic moments. More often, It is revealed through ordinary faithfulness that is practiced consistently. Now, over the years, I've come to appreciate that meaningful relationships are one of God's greatest gifts. Looking back across my own life, from my years with the Benedictine monks, through public service, consulting, teaching, and now serving through the digital world, I don't remember every meeting or every presentation I made. I remember the people, those who encouraged me, those who challenged me, and those who believed in me when I questioned myself. They helped shape not only my career, but my character as well. That realization reminds me that leadership is ultimately about stewardship. God entrusts people to our care, not for our benefit alone, but so that together we may flourish. When we invest in people, we participate in God's ongoing work of restoration. And perhaps that is one of leadership's highest callings. And don't forget our learning lens. As you moved into the coming week, carry this question with you. Who needs to experience Christ's love through the way I listen, encourage, and serve today? And notice that the question begins with who and not what. Leadership begins with people. Success follows service, and influence follows trust. And meaningful relationships grow whenever love is consistently practiced. The command that Jesus gave his disciples remains as relevant today as in yesterday. Love one another as I have loved you. And when that becomes the rhythm of our lives, our leadership changes, our workplace changes, our families change, and our communities change as well. And little by little, the world also changes. Now, thank you for joining me on the Listening Heart. This week, we've explored how genuine Christian love forms the foundation of meaningful relationships and authentic leadership. As you continue your journey this week, I encourage you to revisit the Fontenay Magazine eLearning Leadership Companion article, Relationship Capital, and why it's the currency of the future. Together, the article and today's conversation reminds us that lasting influence is built not merely on knowledge or achievement, but on trust, compassion, and sincere commitment to helping others flourish. Remember, every relationship is an opportunity to reflect the love of Christ. Now, may your conversations be filled with grace, your leadership shaped by humility, and your relationships strengthened through genuine care. Until next time, keep listening with your heart and keep leading with love. Now, next week on the Listening Heart, we'll begin a new journey centered on compassion and empathy. Our next episode is titled Compassion as a Way of Life and Seeing with Christ's Eyes. And together, we'll explore how Jesus noticed those others that were overlooked. And he responded with compassion rather than convenience, and invites us to become people who see beyond appearances into the needs of the human heart. We'll discover how compassion strengthens leadership, deepens relationships, and transforms ordinary encounters into opportunities for God's grace. I hope you'll join me. Now, I'm Richard Fontenay, signing off. See you next week, if not before. Bye now.